everyone! Today we have lesson 7-5 Reteaching, and the objective or the learning goal for this lesson is to divide a whole number by a decimal. So here we have the standard procedures, or we know that's just a fancy way of saying the normal steps you take to divide a whole number by a decimal. So to do this, you have to make sure you divide or multiply both numbers by a power of 10 so that your divisor is a whole number. So let's look at that example down below because that seems like a lot of words explaining a pretty simple process. So the example we have is 154 divided by 7/10 or 0.7. Well, our divisor here is our 7/10. And you'll notice that there's a decimal in that divisor. To be able to divide, to solve this problem, we have to get rid of that decimal. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 7/10 and we're going to multiply it by 10. That's going to cause our decimal to move over one place to the right. So it's going to move to the end. And that's going to get us 7 because this can also be written like that, where the decimal point is behind the 7. So now that our divisor is a whole number, we have to do the same thing to our dividend. Since we multiplied 7/10 by 10, we also need to multiply our dividend, 154, by 10. So same process here. Yes, it's already a whole number, but because you did your divisor, you had to multiply your divisor, you also have to multiply your dividend. I think this is a step that a lot of people kind of leave out or forget. So in 154, because it is a whole number, our decimal is actually already at the end. It's behind the 4. So when we multiply it by 10, because we have 1 0, it's going to move it over to the right one place. So you can see how I kind of did that. I added in that 0 at the end of our number because it started behind the 4, and then when we multiplied it by 10, it moved it over to behind the 0 that comes after the 4. So now that we have a whole number for our divisor and a whole number for a matching number for our dividend, we can go ahead and start dividing. The new problem we're going to solve here, and it's actually going to give us the exact same answer, is 1,540 divided by 7. And now you're at a point where you should be good to go because these are both whole numbers and you're just dividing it out like you normally would. Again, like when you were dividing a decimal dividend, we don't move our decimal at all once we get our final quotient. We just leave it where it is. And in this case, we're most likely not going to have one. So here we have a little practice problem to work on. We have 138 divided by 400ths. And what we need to do, because I see right off the bat that my divisor has a decimal in it, we need to get rid of that. I need to figure out how many times does my decimal point need to move over in order to make this a whole number. Well, you can see that by what I did up top, that I moved it over 2 place value places. So to figure out what number I would need to multiply that by, think back to lesson 7-1 when we were multiplying by powers of 10. We're looking at the number of zeros in the power of 10 and the number of places it needs to move over. So we need to move it over 2 places, so we're going to have 2 zeros. When we multiply 400ths by 100, we're going to get the whole number of 4. And do not forget to do the dividend multiplied by 100 also. So we need to take 138 and we need to multiply that by 100. Okay? And the whole number, our decimal is back at the end like I showed you on the previous slide. And we have 2 zeros, so we're going to move it over 2 spaces. So now we have the original whole number that we started with, and then the 2 empty spaces right there need to be filled in with placeholder zeros. So that's going to give us 13,800. So now we're looking at a new problem. We're looking at 13,800 divided by 4. This is our new problem. We're going to solve it like we normally would. We're not going to move the decimal at all in our quotient. When we solve this, we're going to have our final answer. So let's go ahead and divide this out to figure out what our answer is. So 4 does not go into 1 at all, so I need to move over to the 13. I know that 12 is a multiple of 4, and when I multiply 4 times 3, that's what's going to get me 12. When I subtract these, I get 1. I'm going to bring down my 8, get 18. 4 times 4 is 16, and that's about as close as I can get without going over. When I subtract these, I'm going to get 2. Bring down that first 0, get 20. 20 is a multiple of 4, and that goes into there 5 times, and it divides out evenly. So we're going to get 0. We need to remember to bring it down that last 0. This last 0 right here hasn't been brought down yet. We want to make sure they're included in the party and don't get left out. So now we have just 2 zeros. Well, 4 is not going to go into that, so I need to make sure I have a placeholder 0 above that last digit in my dividend. So now that we have divided this out, we're done. That's it. 3,450 is going to be our final quotient. We don't have to move any decimal points. We don't have to add any in. Okay? I do want to point out one more thing before we wrap things up with this problem. Think if, for a second, if instead of 138, we had 138 thousandths divided by 4 hundredths. So we would do the same thing where we multiply our divisor by a power of 10 to get a whole number. But in this case, our decimal point in our dividend is at the very beginning. We'd move it over 2 times, just like we did with our divisor. So then we would have the problem of 13 8/10 divided by 4. So if we were to divide this out, we're going to use the same strategies that we used in lesson 7-4, I believe it was, when we were dividing a decimal. And we're going to take that decimal point in our dividend, we're going to move it straight up to our quotient, and then we're just going to divide out like we normally would. We would look at it like 138 divided by 4, and our decimal point's already up there. Remember, it is okay to have a decimal point in your dividend, but if you have one in your divisor like we did for this problem, you need to make sure you turn that into a whole number. You may not divide with a decimal divisor. And just to repeat what I just said, it has to be a whole number before you can start dividing. Your divisor must be a whole number. You can see that example down at the bottom is the problem we just walked through. The one on the left with the X, the big red X through it, that's where we have the 4 hundredths written in. The one with the green check mark, which is what it should look like, is when we multiplied it by a power of 10 so that our divisor was a whole number of 4 instead of a 4 hundredths. Okay, so if you ever see a decimal outside of your, I'm not sure what that's called, your division bracket, I guess, your little upside down L here. If you ever have a decimal outside of that, you need to make sure you turn it into a whole number first. Please remember to re-watch any of the parts of this video that you may need clarification on. If you're still confused, please feel free to ask your teacher any questions that you may have. Have a great day.